Hi folks, Trump finally did it. He pulled the plug on the WHO. It's about time. As I mentioned during the last video, the WHO has been bribed or bought by the CCP, so I don't see the reason to continue this organization which is supposed to protect the world's health, but instead has put people's lives in jeopardy. Not only the WHO, but also the World Trade Organization and even the United Nations. Its functions should be reviewed. If memory serves me correctly, I remember the last time I heard about the United Nations Human Rights Committee, which has praised China's human rights record. So obviously these international bodies has lost its function, which is to better the world's conditions and help the people to become more free and healthy. But instead, they are all in cahoots with dictators. I hope all the free countries which will actually pull out of all these organizations and start a new one with the stipulation that a country with a dictatorship is not allowed to be a member. If US is willing to lead this effort, I think there's still hope for this world. As with Dr. Tedros, he's nicknamed Secretary Ted in China. This term, secretary, is kind of like the term comrade. Like if you are a commoner, you address each other as comrade in communist countries. But if you are party official, especially high-ranking party official, you'll be addressed as a secretary so and so. So with the Chinese dubbing him Secretary Ted, means he's actually part of the Communist Party structure. That'll tell you something about how Dr. Tedros has executed his power as the World Health Organization. Now, I like to make some comments about President Trump himself. Did he do a good job in fighting this pandemic? I would give him a B minus, because I do believe he didn't do quite a stellar job as he liked to boast about. Now, I don't think anybody got an A plus. A plus means you have no infection. You totally prevented this pandemic. No country has got a score of A plus, with perhaps the exception of North Korea. Until this time, they have not announced that they had any cases, which I believe is the case, because they just shot anyone who has the virus. So I think it's true. They would have no cases in North Korea. But I don't think anybody else want this kind of A plus. Now, the only country I would put in the A category is Taiwan. And they just had the first 0 case yesterday. And their entire infected population is only 300 something, fewer than 400 people. For a country with over 20 million people, that's an outstanding achievement. I think it deserves an A, at least A minus. Countries that did better than US actually are very few. Well, lots of African countries have very few cases, but their health system is so backwards, you don't really know how many people are infected there. or if they even have the tools to test people there. Among more advanced nations, I think South Korea did better, and perhaps Singapore did better, although they had a recent rise in Singapore as well. That just tells you how difficult it is to get rid of this virus. President Trump did made a good call for shutting down the borders to China in late January, I believe, despite the WHO's criticism. And he shut the European border a bit too late, in my opinion. But even then, the EU leaders were crying foul or whatever against Trump for closing European borders. But he had to do it, and unfortunately he didn't do it quick enough, because New York being the mostly affected, most of the virus actually came from Europe. In New York State's case, in the West Coast, of course, from China. Having said all that, I also have to remind people that when the virus was rampant in China and the Wuhan city was shut down, why are the Americans not more concerned with the issue? If you think back, around that time, the Americans are too busy with impeachment. Remember Nancy Pelosi withheld the impeachment paper for weeks to send it to the Senate, caused this unnecessary delay. Had this impeachment issue being resolved quicker or never even started, Trump might have done an even better job. Just imagine if your job is on the line and people are trying to fire you, how are you going to be supposed to do your best under these circumstances? So my belief is this impeachment fiasco at least had some impact on Trump's performance, which brings back my favorite belief that actions have consequences. We know these New Yorkers voted overwhelmingly for Democrats during the midterm. I have no doubt lots of these ones who passed away did that too. Now here's the line of causation for you. You voted in a Democrat Congress because they had the majority, so they can start an impeachment process. The impeachment process affected Trump's performance, and as a result, more people died. So for those who voted Democrats and died during this pandemic, your vote sowed the seeds for your own death. Some people might consider this analysis is too far-fetched, but if you look at the logical links, surely you had to agree, at least there's some effect of that description is true. Now, I do agree that Trump didn't do a stellar job, especially the timing of shutting down the border to Europe. He should have done that sooner. But hindsight is 2020. When you're in the middle of this process and you only have a few hundred cases in your country, as in the case in February, it was hard to make that decision to shut down an entire continent, which has historically had very strong ties with the USA. So my conclusion is, from statistic point of view, America certainly not the worst country that's been affected to by this pandemic, although it has the highest number of infected and the highest number of deaths on paper. But if you consider the population of the states and the percentage of people getting infected and the percentage of people who died, it's far lower than countries like Italy and Spain and many others. This virus is still evolving, and there's a recent surge in Russia and in Singapore, as I mentioned before. And God knows what's happening in these third world countries, like countries of Africa. Hopefully, the high heat do have some mitigating effect on the spread of this virus, and we're not going to have to live with this for the rest of the year. Oh, another news, I think people should know that China, the CCP, Chinese Communist Government, has just made an announcement to its own people that no one's allowed to investigate the origin of this virus. And I think anybody within China who try to get to the bottom of this probably will get severely punished, or even death penalty for conspiring against the country if they try to investigate the origin of the virus. So I think the world should be more vigilant to see what China is doing. I think in desperation they might wanted to start a war, for example, invading Taiwan. To state it simply, we are living in very interesting times. Thank you. Bye.